And we're live.
Live!
Hello! La, la, la. Hello, all. Welcome. It is Monday Night Generational Change. I'm Jen.
I'm Peter, and it's Jersey's finest in the house tonight.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. We're talking everything Jersey. Did you go to school in New Jersey by chance?
Yeah, I did actually.
I
did.
Where was that you went to school?
Well, considering how badly we got destroyed by Michigan on Saturday, I went to Rutgers, but it's still a proud Scarlet Knight.
You went to Rutgers?
I did, yes.
As people can't see, there's like this big Rutgers poster hanging on the wall.
Yeah, you can't tilt the camera. Well, of course, if we did a show, I still think it'd be more interesting if we set up the studio where we were like facing each other, had more professional cameras set up, the whole shebang.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, I'd like that. Like that. We've been demonetized. This is not the time to be aspiring for new things.
Yeah, usually you would think we would be given a reason as to why we were demonetized.
I know why we were demonetized. We were demonetized because I called out Debbie Wasserman Schultz and how she talked to RFK, and then within a couple of days we were demonetized. That's why.
So the cat's out of the bag on that one.
That's what I think.
Probably, certainly a possibility.
We weren't given any reason, and it just happened. And I'm sorry, we're not big enough that I really think that the powers that be are watching us. So yeah, I do think it had to be personal.
Yeah, usually that does happen. I think that there is
we've had a few things in the past
that exists in the political arena.
There have been times in the past where I'll say, okay, let's put this out. All right, but she's definitely going to do something. And when we did that clip on RFK, I'm like, oh, I'm definitely going to pick for this. And then a couple of days later, we were demonetized. So
yeah, well, you like to say she has her Marsha.
She has like her, it's like her Marsha, and she just can't handle it.
Well, speaking of not so good political representatives,
yes.
Look,
Jersey.
The thing about Senator Menendez, who I knew that Bob Menendez was a corrupt, what, when I was at Rutgers. Oh, that's right. I already messaged that. That's right. I forgot about that.
Did you go to Rutgers, really?
This is in the the mid-2000s, and before he even got to the U.S. Senate, he already had a terrible reputation. And so since he's been elected to the U.S. Senate in what is now going to be the final year of his third term, this is not a new thing. He is highly unethical.
This is the second time he's been indicted.
Correct.
How long ago was it? Well, we'll get into that. I mean, I don't follow, the New Jersey politics other than I know that it's absolutely filthy, and I know that their whole electoral ballot situation is just makes ours look normal.
Well,
I know that.
The thing you also have to remember about the U.S. Congress, which I think a lot of people tend to forget, is that there's corruption everywhere. You really have to get to a certain level of corruption, blatant corruption, to get indicted by the federal government. Like, you just have to be so like...
It's Icarus, man. And I just say, fly, baby, fly. These people's hubris, that's the thing. Pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered, people.
But is it really any surprise for anybody who is from New Jersey and knows the history of New Jersey politics that we're living in a world today where we really don't know what the line is that you have to cross in order to actually get into trouble? And it kind of seems to me that there isn't a line, because all things on paper make it seem like he is dead to rights. And apparently he's not. He's not only not stepping down, but he is defiantly saying, I'm still running. I'm going to keep running.
Again, fly, baby, fly.
And the problem I think that we have here is because of the way the New Jersey first of all, there's a couple things you have to remember. There's the line, there's the New Jersey the party line when it comes to voting in the state, and then there's the New Jersey Democratic Party machine. So when you put those two things together, you basically have these Teflon representatives, and again, Senator Menendez is just one of them.
This political mafia.
Yeah. You have Democratic Representative Frank Pallone, who's coming up on his 18th term in the U.S. House going into next year. And he is certainly not thinking about leaving anytime soon. And he's just one. I mean, I don't have to get into all the different names of the wonderful representatives that we have.
And this is a blue state.
A very blue state.
So, for all those people out there that think that the corruption is only on the right.
No.
Although, again, I would argue we really don't have a left, but for people who think it only happens in the Republican Party.
No, what we have are two major political parties that unfortunately play off each other. And
we have a center and a right.
It gets much worse in the states that are solidified within one political party. Like, for example, if you're in a state where you basically have one political party, and yes, a Republican slips through once in a while in the what is known as the off year election cycle in New Jersey. New Jersey is one of like 5 states that elects their state representatives in the off year. So, for example, this year, New Jersey is having their elections for the state. The federal elections are always when the federal elections.
What kind of backgassford thing is that to do?
Well, hey, that's how Chris Christie ended up in the governor's mansion.
Okay.
But that's how it works usually in rare circumstances. But for the most part, New Jersey is a blue state. And much like red states like Florida, you see the opposite effect of what you think would happen when the party finally takes control. No, it's just as corrupt, controversial as any place that you're going to find. And who better to bring in this evening to talk about this than...
You got to bring in the Jersey people to talk about Jersey.
Got to bring in my Jersey people.
And we're not talking like the Jersey Shore thing. Is that show even a thing? Is that still a thing? I don't know anything about any of that. I don't know anything about any of that.
I think there's something to it.
I just know
really
it was a reality show.
I told you, I went to high school with one of those clowns. So unfortunately,
oh my God.
shouldn't have been too controversial. But nevertheless, when Jen ran for Congress in 2020, there was, we talk about our podcast being small but mighty. There was a small but mighty faction known as the Brand New Congress, who did an amazing job of helping a number of candidates, in particular AOC and Cori Bush, getting elected into the U.S. Congress. Also helped out Jamal Bowman as well. And there have been many other great up-and-comers that have taken on the tremendous responsibility and what would be considered a very detrimental role in society, which is running for public office. Yeah. Even more so running for federal office in the state of New Jersey.
And we say slate mates, but really, you know what it feels like to me? It feels like class. Like it feels like almost like a graduating class, even though there was no graduation. It almost has that sort of feeling like an alumni thing.
Yes.
Well, just from, because that's how it feels.
She ran in New Jersey's 10th congressional district, representing North Jersey by Seton Hall and many places in the surrounding area that you know about. Friend of the show, welcome back as always, Imani Oakley to Generational Change.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Imani, good to see you.
Yeah, same.
And we also have our wonderful friend who also is a classmate.
I don't know. We'd say slate mates, but that's just I don't know. It feels like do you know what I mean, Imani, right? Like, doesn't it kind of feel like a class? And like an election cycle as a class?
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
He ran in New Jersey's 8th district, which, if I remember correctly, represents Paterson, New Jersey. So we are pleased to welcome back Hector Oseguera. Welcome back to Generational Change.
Hey, Hector.
Hey, everyone. Good to see y'all.
Good to see you.
Actually, Paterson is not in the district, but Jersey City is.
Ah, okay. All right.
So where are you guys in relation to each other?
Geographically.
Yeah, okay. We're literally next door, and our districts have a not so great reputation of. I live in what happens to be the Hispanic gerrymander. City like Jersey City is literally cut in half between the Black and Hispanic portions, with the Hispanic portions ending up in my district and all the Black parts ending up in Imani's district, coincidentally.
Well, but let me ask you, so we talk about gerrymandering and it's definitely used mostly negatively, but let's say your district didn't have, let's say they split it in a way so that there was not in either district a Latino majority. It's almost like that's when you also fail to get representation sometimes. So sometimes they cut it so that then nobody gets really any real representation because they make it so there's no majority.
Yeah, that's what they actually tried to do in the 10th. They tried to actually gut like the Black vote in certain towns here that would have served to cut me out because I live in these majority Black neighborhoods. And then it also would have helped to pad Mikey Sherrill, who is a blue dog white woman congresswoman. And it would have took the voting power of those Black voters from about 53% down to about like 9%. So they essentially would have had no say in the district. So, right. I mean, it is kind of a weird thing. But one of the things that, folks were advocating for was actually New Jersey is so diverse racially that actually every district could have been a quote unquote minority majority district. And they were actually advocating and pushing for that. But of course, as I'm sure we'll get into today, a lot of corruption put a stop to what would have been probably historic in the nation.
Yeah, and if I could just chime in for a second there, the problem that we get with, this positive gerrymandering, as it could be said, is that what the machine does is that they will pick a person of that racial descent to be their sort of token representation. So here in the district, our current congressman is actually Bob Menendez Jr., who is of Cuban descent.
Wait, and literally that's his son?
Yeah, yeah. It's
That's how
literally
he
his son.
Seriously, this is like The Sopranos. This is like crazy.
Indeed, it is. And so they'll put up a guy like that and say, oh, here you go. You have your Hispanic representation. And I know it's similar with Imani. She's got Donald Payne in her district. And so the machine puts up a guy like that and says, okay, Black voters, you've got your representation, when in fact, they're working for the same political machine that serves mostly white old men.
Also, a guy who inherited the seat from his dad. So, one might say it's a tradition.
Yeah. So here's something else that I found interesting as somebody who's second generation native Floridian. How large is your Cuban population there? Because here, like something that's very interesting to me, and I'm sure you've run into this, to a lot of white people, Latino is Latino, right? You speak Spanish, so therefore you're Latino. But as somebody growing up in South Florida, Cubans are usually not representative of the majority of the rest of the Latino population. They do tend to be red, especially in Miami, versus other Latino. I mean, they are definitely a very unique, based on immigration and policy. They are a unique group. So I don't know how big is your Cuban population, whereas is he really representative of that?
Well, I'll say here in my district, we have more Cubans than you have in Miami. So we have more, we actually, I believe, have more Cubans than live in Cuba, if I'm not mistaken. And yes, you're right. Cubans skew far, far to the right when compared with other Hispanics. And it's something that used to be representative in the 80s and 90s. There were a lot more Cubans than other Spanish demographics. But since then, there have been a lot more Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, people from Central and South America coming to the district. And so the views that used to be pretty commonplace, specifically amongst those Cuban immigrants, is now pretty out of step with the regular, what you would call the rest of the Hispanic community here. Unfortunately, they're still overly represented, meaning the Cubans, who are much more conservative, are much more politically engaged and therefore much more represented. Those views are much more represented than you would think and expect, and definitely is out of step with the rest of the Hispanic communities that exist in the district.
Yeah. How did I not know there was that big of a Cuban community up in New Jersey? Like, I really did. I had no idea. I would have not thought that. I would have thought it was more like how New York is in terms of the breakdown. I don't know. That's just really interesting. I wouldn't have never.
Could you guys?
It's called Havana on the Hudson.
Havana on the Hudson.
Wow.
Yeah.
Before we get into Menendez, I just want you guys to touch on what actually happened and what has occurred since 2018, when there was the blue wave, particularly in California and New Jersey, where there was basically a complete sweep. The only Congress member who was red, who didn't flip, of course, was mine, Chris Smith. But for the rest of the state, it basically went from a number of districts that were moderate Republican to basically full neoliberal blue, led, of course, by Mickey Sherrill and Josh Gottheimer. And if you guys can talk about those two representatives in particular, and how, with the exception of maybe some things here and there when it comes to guns and maybe abortion, you basically have Republicans representing a significant portion of working class people, especially in North Jersey, that I don't think gets talked about enough. And New Jersey is one of the more unique states in the country where it's mostly urban working class sandwiched between upper middle class suburbia. It's a very unique setup in terms of how these communities are formed and, frankly, are maintained.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, with regards to those two in particular, I mean, it's just the typical thing that you're seeing all across the country. I mean, you see Josh Gottheimer come out every once and then beating the war drum for the Blue Dogs. Mikey Sherrill's a bit more quiet about it, but essentially her politics are, pretty in line with that, corporate Dem, etc. I mean, I think one of the issues really is the machine is very, very tricky. I have seen this happen time and time again. One of the things that people do when they first get into politics in New Jersey, like they're just trying to be a good Democrat and they're going to go and they're going to talk to whoever like the big name Democrat in their area is, which, 9 times out of 10, or I would probably say 9.99 times out of 10 is a machine person. And what that machine person will tell them is things like, oh, you want to work on this upcoming campaign, or, you want to come to these county committee meetings and get people to know you, or, hey, we're having a fundraiser. We'd love for you to come out. And essentially, like, they treat them really nice at first. But then, they start to just bring them into their whole ideology as a machine. And I think with not so much necessarily with Josh Gottheimer, but certainly with Mikey Sherrill, there was a whole slew of, I think in the beginning, well-meaning suburban white women who really, at the time, Donald Trump had just gotten into office and, he had, done all the grab them by the, what, that type of stuff. And there was a Republican who was in that seat who decided to bully one of the women in the area. And, there was like a whole uprising. People got behind Mikey Sherrill. But since then, the push has been very pro-white, very pro-suburbia. I mean, the example I gave earlier was nearly gutting the black vote just to pad this person who's Mikey Sherrill, who's not even that progressive and really not that much different than, say, a Josh Gottheimer, except she's a little bit more reserved and quiet and probably one might argue nicer in her words. So that's one of the things that has happened. And it's a difficult fight to fight, especially as a progressive of color, because you have to make the case to these folks who, pretty much worship Mikey Sherrill for the things that she represents, not necessarily her policies, that, hey, this actually isn't good for the rest of us. And again, that was a huge part of the argument during the redistricting fight. We knocked on a lot of doors actually with my campaign, and we were trying to get people to come out to testify against this. And what we would find is when we would knock on the doors of Black voters, they would totally get it. They'd be like, yeah, man, nobody listens to us. It's been years. These are our problems. The same people win every year. Our situation never gets better. In this area, foreclosure was a huge issue. And also people going around trying to get older Black people to sell their homes for cheap is an issue. People complained about that. And so they were ready to come out and testify. We would knock on a door and it would be a white voter. It would be a little bit more tricky. They'd say things like, well, but we have to protect Mikey Sherrill from Republicans. And what our script would say, what we would say to them is, well, okay, we don't like Republicans either. But I think as both of us being Democrats, we have to agree, we actually want to protect the Black vote, right? And they were like, yeah, they would reluctantly sign. So it's a really tricky, thing, that this game that the machine plays, with regards to the districts and certain seats being reserved for people of color and certain ones reserved for white folks. It's very antiquated, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely second a lot of that. I've heard a lot of those stories, similar stories, even in my district. I would say that what we have going on in New Jersey is that you have a lot of sort of normie Dems, people who sort of got turned onto politics maybe because Donald Trump or something like that, and they sort of see the fight as more only between Republicans and Democrats, and they don't really care too much what type of Democrat you start to get in those seats, and you end up with these very, very corporatist Dems, people who could easily be Republicans in the state and usually took the seat, like Imani said, from a Republican. And so the voters in those districts are sort of reluctant to go for a real progressive because they've been fed this idea that, well, if you get a progressive, they're just going to lose to a Republican and you're going to have a Republican in office. So what you end up getting is a lot of corporatist Dems. And like Imani said, I know right now, because we're talking about Bob Menendez, you see the cartoonish nature of machine politics, but they're not dumb. They know what they do and how to do it pretty well. What they really do is basically scare voters into voting for their candidates, and they've done it pretty well. They have a significant turnout machine that they can turn on at the flip of a switch, and it's pretty difficult for a progressive like myself or like Imani to cut through that messaging, because it's what the voters are being fed on a daily basis.
Yeah, that sounds like a microcosm of the rest of the country, really. I mean, it might be filthier and have a lot more nepotism, but we have the same nonsense here. We have the same nonsense here. There's no real left. There's no Labor Party. There's none of that. There's just sort of like this corporate blue facade that just sort of says, well, we're better than them because, well, you know, they're scary and they're mean about people.
I wish people would figure out that the real key factor here is the only reason why the Democrat establishment comes to the working class brown and black communities, particularly in North Jersey, and tells them you have to support this candidate, is because both parties are completely controlled, especially in New Jersey, by Wall Street money. And so ultimately what will end up happening, which they will not say, is that if you decide to get behind a candidate who is not representative of Wall Street interests, we will simply just go with the Republicans and give them our money. So that is you're literally being pushed off a cliff. And people need to realize that nothing's ever going to change until you finally stand up and say, I'm not taking it anymore, because I know the game that's being played here. And that, I think, is in a lot of ways what is a perfect segue into what's going on here with Senator Bob Menendez, who is, as, again, there's certain levels of corruption that I think people tolerate in politics, but then it gets to the point where it's just so blatant and in your face, kind of like with Trump, who just doesn't care.
So it's like this would be like the Oscar winner for corruption.
Yeah, and but he's
nice.
Again playing the whole role of the oppressed individual. You know, I am a political prisoner is basically what he wanted to say at his presser this afternoon. So we're going to play a clip.
I don't know that I can stomach this. I started watching it and I just sort of felt like I needed a shower. So then
I've watched it several times. I won't lie.
It's icky, but
in Spanish and English.
Oh,
no, you end up watching it several times. You end up watching it several times because you literally cannot believe what he's saying. You're like, there is a level of just complete ignorance and defiance that one will actually put out there, but he's really telling you, I'm not going down.
It's a level of entitlement. You know what? It's really what I think I could call you lately, but I don't know. It's like the caucasity. You know what I'm saying? Like just the utter caucasity of the situation. It's like he's just sitting there like, yeah, sure.
All right, here we go. The esteemed soprano senator, Bob Menendez.
Part of this investigation, special agents with the FBI executed search warrants on the residence and safe deposit box of Senator Menendez and Nadine Menendez in New Jersey. When they got there, they discovered approximately $500,000 of cash stuffed into envelopes and closets.
We need to know the facts, not the latest spin dropped by Rudy Giuliani. The facts. Congress must carry out its constitutional duty to fully and thoroughly investigate where the facts lead. That's why we must protect the integrity of all oversight efforts, including the objective, sober investigation.
But as I have stated throughout this whole process, I firmly believe that when all the facts are presented, not only will I be exonerated, but I still will be the New Jersey's senior senator.
Agents also discovered a lot of gold that was provided by Davies and Hanna. And the FBI, of course, found the Mercedes-Benz that Uribe had provided them.
That all people are presumed innocent until proven guilty. All people. I ask for nothing more and deserve nothing less. The court of public opinion is no substitute for our revered justice system. Third, for 30 years, I have withdrawn thousands of dollars in cash from my personal savings account, which I have kept for emergencies and because of the history of my family facing confiscation in Cuba. To those who have rushed to judgment, you have done so based on a limited set of facts framed by the prosecution to be as salacious as possible. Remember, prosecutors get it wrong sometimes,
very much.
A very
Yeah.
nice touch with the Sopranos theme song.
Yeah,
playing
and
in the
I would also suggest that in federal prosecution, they very rarely get it wrong, and in fact, their rates are insane. I don't know if
90
like
something, upper
like
90s.
if this were a state court thing, then it's a matter of sure they'll throw enough shit against the wall, they'll please something down, they'll see what they can do, and they don't really care. It's just a matter of just doing their jobs. But the feds, if they're doing this, then they have you. It's done. It's over. Right?
One thing I want to touch on from that clip that you just showed is like when he walks out, I don't know if anybody noticed that one woman who like gives him a pat on the back and is like, "No, we got your back. We're here for you."
Is
That's where we live.
When I watched it earlier.
Is that your general vibe up there?
Yes. I was asked this by a journalist who does a show on politics, and he asked me point blank, will the Hispanic voters ever turn against this guy? And they won't. They're not going to, especially the Cuban voters who, like I said, are very politically active.
Yeah.
They will never turn on him. They think it's a witch hunt, that he's being, gone after because of whatever, and they will not ever turn on him.
So he's literally going to be taken out in handcuffs. That's basically the only way he's going. And it's very possible that that's what's going to happen. But I think it also speaks to a litany of other issues here. Now, of course, Imani, you and I had briefly texted about this, but it does seem that congressional representative in New Jersey's 2nd District down in South Jersey, we say Jersey in South Jersey, Andy Kim, who is very much a moderate, there's no getting around it. But is he a filthy Democrat? No, I would not say that. But his intention is to run. And so if there is going to be a primary, I think if he gets in, I think others will attempt to get in as well. And then it becomes a free-for-all, and we'll see what ultimately ends up happening, where if it's like 4 or 5 candidates, it's like different blocks of the state. The Newark, Irvington, Elizabeth region of New Jersey is basically on lock for Menendez. But there are a lot of other places where, depending on what people intend to do.
Has he been primaried before? Sorry.
Yes.
He was. He was in 2018 by somebody who doesn't have a huge profile and got nearly 40%. And someone who doesn't have a good profile is being very, very kind.
Yeah, I was about to say that is a moderate way to put that.
This person is essentially known as a maniac, as a flaming-haired maniac who nobody takes seriously. Got 40% of the vote in a two-way race, though. So again, you hope that it would be, you don't want that free-for-all to happen. You would prefer for the field to be consolidated amongst 2 candidates, especially. I'm sure we're going to touch upon the line and how all that works. But if you have a candidate with a significant profile like Andy Kim in a two-way race with Bob Menendez is in a ton of trouble. And you can see the splinters already showing in that one of the mayors in my district says that he's seriously considering challenging Junior for his congressional seat, which 2 weeks ago would have been unheard of and unthought of, and blasphemy against the machine, because again, that mayor is deeply entrenched within the machine. So you are starting to see these fissures amongst the power structure that might actually end up in bringing these guys down.
Yeah, so and I definitely.
Go ahead.
Oh, please, Imani, go ahead.
Go. Yeah, I was gonna say I am not yet sold that this is just going to be an easy fight for Andy Kim or any other Democrat that jumps in against Menendez. And the reason why is obviously I don't support Menendez. I don't support any machine actor or establishment Dem. But the thing that I think the rest of the country doesn't recognize is that this is business as usual in New Jersey. New Jersey is so deeply corrupt. One of the charges, or one of the complaints that's being brought up, is that Menendez's wife has a no-show job. where, there's just a title and they get paid through it and they never have to come. That is so common for machine people in New Jersey. In fact, it's viewed as like a reward for being what they call quote unquote loyal. So meaning you go, you knock on doors for them, you do whatever they say, you worship them, tell them they're always right, and they'll give you a job where you can make like real good money, sometimes six figures,
hundreds of
and
thousands,
not go
yeah.
up.
And never be there.
So with that being so common, if Menendez starts doing retaliation leaking, if he's still got it in him to do some fighting back, I don't know that it's going to be so easy, because I don't think Andy Kim is really that entrenched in the dirtiness, considering he was more of a Washington guy before that seat. But if the people he brackets with, or if the people who are supporting him are in that area, Menendez can make the connection. So I'm not yet sold. I think it really depends on how much of a dying beast Menendez currently is. Like, is he so wounded that he can't start doing retaliations? Or is it like, nah, like he's going to start retaliating any day now and it's going to be just a bloodbath?
Well, let's put this scenario on the table then. Not a surprise. Governor Murphy has been somewhat surprising in a positive way, which is a good thing. Obviously, we're not going to get into Senator Booker. Nice man, an absolute, sorry if you see this, Corey, but an absolute coward of a politician. So he's not going to say anything.
He's a farm whore, no?
Yes, and then some. Also, Israel lobby. Big time. Huge, big time. And so he's not going to say anything. He's going to keep his mouth shut until he's told otherwise. So the question becomes, if it is Andy Kim, and if Governor Murphy endorses Andy for the Senate seat, do you think that holds any serious weight come a primary next, I think, June?
I'll say that I don't think it'll matter. I'm going to really harp on a lot of what Imani said. The state is really run by the counties. So the governor's endorsement won't go very far unless you get the county line in each of the 21 counties. And I agree that Bob Menendez has been there for so long that he knows where a lot of the bodies are buried all across the state. So the power players in South Jersey have bodies that are buried, the ones in Northwest and Northeast Jersey. And so if he does have enough pull, especially, Menendez, like you said, he's big with the Israel lobby. He's big with the corporate lobby, the pharmaceutical lobby that's huge in the state. And they're going to shower him with money. I mean, you think these corporate donors care at all about this corruption stuff? They're usually on the receiving end of the favors that he's giving. So no, that, his power base remains intact. And Hudson County is one of the most densely populated places in the country. So I have a nightmare scenario where Bob Menendez only gets the Hudson County line, and that would be responsible for enough voters that he could potentially win a statewide primary with essentially just Hudson County and whatever strings he can pull in other parts of the state. Now, that's a nightmare scenario, but it's very possible for somebody who's had that sort of sway and the sort of pull that Bob Menendez has had in this state. So I would agree with Imani. This is not a done deal by any stretch of the imagination.
I mean, one thing that might be different, I'm curious, because I know this is the second time that he's had corruption indictment against him. But in this particular case, we're talking about, conspiring with foreign nation. You're talking about him using his position and having some sort of agreement with Egypt. And I don't know if in the past it was more just our typical run-of-the-mill corporate corruption, or if it was any potential like international potential homeland security issue kind of thing, because there sort of might be a difference in the way people view that level of corruption in terms of what it means.
Yeah, I mean, so I think the bigger thing that's different from this time than last time is the amount of evidence. Like, I think if I'm remembering correctly, the evidence last time was not nearly as like smoking gun as the stuff that's going on now. So I think there's that. But I mean, I'm thinking back, and I didn't follow this too closely because I was also running for office at the time. But when what's his face, who in Texas, who was doing the dealings with Azerbaijan.
You talking about the Attorney General of Texas?
No. He ran against Jessica Cisneros. And my
you're talking about
Cuellar.
Yeah. So he had that, incident during there, and that just kind of disappeared. Now, granted, he was running against a progressive, and you know how the Democratic Party will run harder against progressives than anyone else in the world. Yeah. So this is a little bit different because, there's going to be establishment people running against Menendez. But I say that to say, like, we've seen people get stuff in trouble for international stuff before, and it hasn't made a difference. I really just think it comes down to how much firing power Menendez has left in him. Because I do think firepower backs people off. It really does. When you start, doing those hits, that really backs people off. So we'll see.
He's going to have a ton of money, no doubt about it. And then I'm not just talking about gold bars. I'm talking about max out donors all across the state and certainly all across the country, probably many in Florida.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he'll have PAC money too. I mean, the people like that, if you're in with, APAC and those organizations, you don't even need to have your own money.
Right.
I mean,
I'm still convinced that one of the bigger problems here, and we'll definitely get to the party line in a second, I do think that the bigger issue here is the left, the more corrupt, the more entrenched you become within the party infrastructure, regardless if it's the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, is as you alluded to, unfortunately in New Jersey, it's not a laughing matter about where the bodies are buried. I mean, people like to joke about that, but in our state, people literally are removed if they get out of line. It's not just the Sopranos. It's basically how business is done in the Garden State. It's been that way for generations. And so the amount of information that the senator has on other people in the party, at the local level, the state level, the federal level, it's very similar to my sentiments regarding our Congresswoman and why she is still in power in spite of all of the things that she has done. The Democratic Party in many ways has been dead and buried in the state, and she's had a lot to do with that. And yet no one is even attempting to point the finger at her and say, maybe if she wasn't in power, we would probably be a lot better off as a party and as a state. And the same is probably true for a lot of people who are looking at Senator Menendez right now and thinking, we should definitely take a chance with somebody else and work from there, because a lot of the more active people that are now in politics, but there's still that element of, I'm Senator Menendez and I know everything about everybody. And if any of you even attempt to get out of line, I'll bury you all where you stand. Because if I'm going to fall, I'm going to have a nice soft landing wherever that's going to be.
I have a very interesting anecdote related to that exactly, is that there's a political consultant from Jersey City named Sean Cattle who literally hired a hitman to murder a political opponent of his. And he was convicted for the murder, and he's sort of turned and feds, and he's giving them statements. But this guy who hired a hitman once told someone that Bob Menendez was the most ruthless person he had ever met. So a guy who hires hitmen to murder his political opponents says Bob Menendez is the most ruthless person he's ever met. And so, yes, it's people can say as a metaphor where the bodies are buried, but people who know New Jersey politics know that that takes on a very literal meaning in this state.
Yeah.
There's also alleged. Go ahead.
No, I just said we're not all that different down here. But then again, a lot of the people from here are all basically from the tri-state area originally anyway. So basically, but yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, there's also alleged political murders that they made an entire podcast based on one murder that took place in South Jersey. And it's, alleged or subtly alleged that one of the party bosses down there had that committed because of they wanted some properties on the waterfront or something like that. So it is unfortunately again, like Hector said, we joke about where the bodies are buried, but in New Jersey, really things can get violent and out of hand. Not only that, not only just like death, but there's been elections around here where people start fighting each other in the street. It's just the thing that has really kept New Jersey's nonsense under such a lid is the gutting of local papers and the gutting of things like investigative journalism and the gutting of being able to really get out there and point the finger at people and expose things. It's so hard to do that in New Jersey because of our news landscape and the underfunding of it, how it also just gets swallowed up because we're in between Philadelphia and New York. So those bigger outlets swallow stuff up. So that's one of the reasons why a lid has been able to been kept on all of these really very, very open secrets in New Jersey.
So I take it the Star-Ledger really does not ever write anything controversial, especially about somebody like Menendez. Like they basically, they've been bought out like a lot of these other papers have been. I mean, I grew up with the Asbury Park Press, and they usually were pretty fair, I would say, in terms of what they would put out there. But I'm assuming that this is a serious problem when it comes to print media.
It's rare. It's very rare. It's starting to get a little bit like this past year. I think it's gotten a little bit better as far as kind of like more investigative stories and kind of more, I would frankly say, bravery of the journalists to really get out there and call people out. But it's nowhere near, where it would need to be to fight this level of corruption. And fun fact, in New Jersey, we have these papers called tap-intos. And a lot of the people who sit on the boards or own those papers are either sitting elected officials or they're staffers. So you have these staffers owning these papers, or sometimes not only staffers, but Democratic operatives too will buy these papers. And they're machine operatives, of course. And they'll buy these papers. And so, of course, if you have these folks sitting on the boards of those papers or flat out owning the paper in its entirety, you're not going to get those revealing stories. You're going to get everything. Every establishment machine person is going to be, hugging people and helping elderly women across the street and kissing babies. And you're not going to get any of the actual journalism needed to expose the level of corruption that takes place in New Jersey.
Yeah, we have the same thing going on here in Hudson County, which again is very densely populated, and our only local paper is an online print, which has a 1 or 2 person staff. So it has gotten better in the recent past, but it's nowhere near to the level that where we need to have a lot of these stories told.
I also think a lot of what has changed over the past 20 years significantly in the outer reaches of New York City, which of course is Hoboken, Jersey City, now Union City. These places at one time were obviously very urban dwellings, if not the outright ghetto. Obviously, they've changed significantly, but as a reflection of the way that the capitalist system is just so perpetually broken at this point, it doesn't turn into working and middle class areas. It turns into upper class areas. It literally goes from people who don't have a pot to piss in to people who literally own the entire pool.
And then what happens to the people that didn't have the pot to piss?
They just get pushed further out. They go out to East New York, just different places where they cannot, again, you can't afford to live. So when people wonder why these things are happening,
gentrification
is a really big problem. So the people who live in Hoboken, for example, they're not really concerned about this type of stuff because their level of economic success dictates that I don't really need to worry about this on a daily basis compared to the way it was 20 years ago. But even now, it just gets bought out more and more.
They might even like it is the sick part of it, right? I live in where you're talking about. I live in Union City. I live right next to Hoboken in Jersey City, right? A lot of the people who we're importing from New York are people that the mayors are happy to bring because they bring a capital base that they can put up all these fancy high rises. And the people who I grew up with are kicked out of the district, out of their hometowns, and they're sent to the next ghetto. So the sick thing is that the people who come in and have a ton of capital and they live in Hoboken or Jersey City, but they work in Manhattan, they could care less. They want their Whole Foods, they want their Starbucks. They really could care less who's stuffing the envelopes full of cash in whose pocket.
I will also say, though, that one glimmer of hope was, during my election, we did polling on like what issues were super important to people. And typically when you do this across the country, it's like pocketbook issues, the environment, maybe education, depending on where you are. And corruption typically does not like end up pretty high. Corruption actually in the polling we did was tied for third, which is like, that's really, really rare. And so, one glimmer of hope is that like, it's just so unabashed here that like the corruption that everyday people are like, no, these people are corrupt. So I think there is some room for change because I think the awareness is there. The problem is we don't really have anything to test that with because there hasn't been a progressive that had enough resources to really test what happens when you have a progressive that is backed with like good money and good national resources and good media, and how that would then create turnout in favor of progressives. I think that's the one key that we need to see.
I was going to ask you, like, what's going on up there now in terms of, are there any interesting campaigns? Are there any decent challengers? Like, what's the scene look like there going into 24?
I think that there's too much. This has thrown New Jersey's political world into an upheaval. And so things are going to shift quickly. A week from now, things might look radically different. I think that there's hope that this upheaval will bring in new people into the mix that have new ideas and that are willing to speak for the people. Unfortunately, like was said before, the machine is very powerful and they know how to get things done. So what we don't want is for Menendez to be swept out and Menendez Jr. to inherit the seat, right? That's what we don't want. And that's unfortunately the most likely thing to happen. So right now, there are a few interesting candidates that have been exploring runs. I think that it'll have to come a lot closer to the primary season for us to see how far this is going to go, especially because the line plays such a major role in the way that elections are run, that whoever runs is going to have to recruit candidates up and down the ballot. And then, given that 24 is a presidential year, whoever the Joe Biden campaign wants to bracket with at the Senate level is going to make a huge difference. So we're going to have to see what the line ends up looking like, unfortunately, before we can say definitively, at least in my district, whether there's any, really good prospects for the future.
I will add a glimmer of hope because I just feel like this is so like everything sucks, it's corruption. So for the viewers out there, sorry, I hear you. And here's the small glimmer of hope. There is an ounce of evidence that in high information elections, the ballot line actually doesn't do as much damage. And I think this is unique in New Jersey with regards to a Senate race because now all eyes are on NJ as a result of this Menendez thing. So some examples of that are in 2017, the governor's primary, the ballot really didn't like have too much of an issue because it was an open seat. Everybody had all eyes on it. The candidates were well, resourced for the most part. So the ballot line didn't really hurt as much as a result of it being high information. Another example of this is Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, where, Joe Biden got the line, but Bernie Sanders was off of it. But Bernie Sanders had such a big name that like people were voting for Bernie, they were going to find him on there. And the only way they would be confused is because Bernie didn't bracket with anybody. So he was out in the middle of the ballot by himself when Joe Biden was in this long line of Democrats. So what would happen? I actually got a lot of calls from older voters asking me about this because they wanted to vote for Bernie and then vote for Booker and like some other people down in the line that Joe Biden was in. They were like, well, I don't understand. Like, am I allowed to vote for Bernie? Can I go here and go there? And I had to explain to them how the ballot line works, essentially. So, but, for the most part, because of Bernie's big name, it didn't hurt him as much as it would have hurt somebody who's, just fresh getting out there. So the one silver lining is because of how high profile this all is, if somebody can build a bracket and build a line, it might be, less important, the ballot line this time around, because it's such a high information election.
So when it comes to the ballot line,
Yeah, let's explain that. Hector, do me a favor. Stick your chain inside your shirt.
Is too shiny for y'all?
No, it's
Menendez gonna grab it.
No, it's hitting the mic.
Oh, my bad.
No, it's all good. Thank you.
Come on, bro. We're not actually in Union City walking on the street. Right now. I'm not trying to grab your shit.
I don't tuck my chain on my block, thankfully. I lived here enough years that the guys know who I am.
Yeah, no, I don't. I only suggest it for audio purposes.
No, I appreciate it.
Trust in the actual political system is dwindling by the day. We've been saying for a long time that the biggest reason, maybe above all others, that people are not really engaged with the Democratic Party anymore, at least at the federal level, is because there are superdelegates in the presidential primary process, which means effectively that it is a rigged process. There is no way for an insurgent candidate to actually win. So as a result, more and more people are looking at Dr. Cornel West on the Green Party ticket, the prospect of RFK running as an independent. There's a lot of leveled interest, rightfully so, of going in another direction because the party has basically been exposed. And much more so now, in the case of Senator Menendez, a lot more people are going to be privy to specific information pertaining to the New Jersey ballot line, which is extremely controversial and, dare I say, rigging of the electoral process.
I find it incredibly confusing. I didn't understand it when it was explained to me last time. No, I understand that. And if I lived there, I'd make myself understand it, but I don't. And so, like, you guys start talking, I hear the voice from Charlie Brown. And the thing is, like, and I remember Zina on here trying to explain it, and Zina's very technical, you know, like she's very like engineer-minded technical. So I thought maybe that's why I don't understand it, but I don't know. Let's see if I can understand the line thing. Who's best at explaining it?
I'll give Imani the first shot because she's really good.
Go with New Jersey ballot line for dummies, like how you do your cute little Schoolhouse Rock type videos. Do it.
I'm just a bill. Should I go sit on the Trenton State House?
I love your videos.
Ballot.
I love your videos. I told him, like, I want to know who does them, and I figured you actually did do them yourself. I said she probably does them herself, but they're so cute. But anyway, yeah, explain it like you would explain it to, like, let's say, I don't know, like a sixth grader. You know, like at that level. Yeah.
Yeah. So the first and most important thing you need to know is that New Jersey has the most corrupt ballot design in the entire nation. That's not exaggeration. It's not hyperbole. It is absolutely true. We are the only state in the nation that has a ballot that looks like this. And how it looks is there will be machine Democrats, and they will be in one long column. Sometimes it's vertical, sometimes it's horizontal, which also adds to voter confusion because you can be in one county and your ballot go horizontal. You can be in another one and it goes vertical. Like, it's all over the place. There's no standardization. And they'll all be in one long column. And anybody who is challenging the machine in some way, shape, or form, even if you are a totally valid candidate, somebody like Bernie Sanders, you'll be placed in random places on the ballot. So you might be all the way out to the side, way away from the column, which is where they call ballot Siberia. You might be way down at the bottom where somebody's eyes won't naturally gravitate to. You might be way in the top corner, right? You're going to be somewhere that's weird and awkward and placed in a way where it's like, okay, like no one's really going to look there. And if they do, they're going to assume you're some wackadoo because you're not in the long line of Democrats with names that they know. And so what this does is it causes voter confusion. Voters go in there wanting to do their due diligence, wanting to vote, like good Democrats, and they'll look straight for the Democrats in that long column. They'll say, okay, I recognize these names. I recognize Booker. I recognize, Menendez or, Donald Payne, whoever on down. They'll recognize them, Joe Biden. And they'll say, okay, I'm a Democrat. Here's where the serious Democrats are. This is where I'm going to go vote down. Not knowing that those are the Democrats that are super, super corrupt and are typically responsible for the many issues that they're having or, the lack of response that they're having for their issues, from everything from lead in the water to foreclosure to ICE facilities. Those are the folks in this column. Now, contrast that with what the rest of the country's ballots look like. In the rest of the country, anyone who is running for the same position is going to be in the same little box. So let's take the Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden example. They're both running for president, so they're going to be in the same box one after another. There's a little bit of data that says whoever comes first sometimes get the advantage, but it's so statistically slight that it really doesn't matter that much. So the people who are running for the same position are going to be in that same box, and there's going to be another box for senator, another box for Congress, et cetera, et cetera. So that voters aren't just going like straight down a line. They actually have to look and see who they're voting for each time, which again causes less voter confusion and makes it overall more fair. And you know, people have done studies on the ballot line and its effects, and in some cases it has been it's given an advantage of up to like somewhere around 35%, like just off of being placed on the ballot line. That's like without campaigning, without anything else, just being placed on that ballot line, you can already start ahead around 35 or so points. So it's the most corrupt ballot design in the entire nation, and it has been screwing us for a very, very long time, to say the least.
So
That
if you guys are
ridiculous.
the picture you guys have on the screen, if you could just zoom in on that top section there, so that the viewers can see a little bit better. Yep,
Okay,
right there.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is what the line looks like, and you can see that Joe Biden in column B has Cory Booker, has the congressman who I ran against, and then has a county official called Jerry Walker. And what this does is it gives voters the false impression that Joe Biden is endorsing every single person underneath them. And what most voters do is they see Joe Biden, okay, I want to vote for him. And then you just go down the line and you vote for every other person in that same line. And anybody who is a part of a column that is in any way incomplete, to the average voter, looks to you as if you're somehow an illegitimate voter or an illegitimate candidate. So you'll see somebody named Will Sheehan on column D, all the way in the right. That person maybe got 1,000 votes because of the position that they're on in the ballot. Saying nothing about their policies, the legitimacy of their candidacy. Just putting them in this part of the ballot, which we call Ballot Siberia, essentially means that there's no way you're going to win that election. If you put an elected person, an incumbent, in Ballot Siberia, they will lose that election to whoever is part of the complete up to down ballot line. And so this has the dual purpose of it predetermines who will win an election, and then it gives voters a false impression as to who is a legitimate and who is an illegitimate candidate. And the reason I like this example so much is because supposedly the way that you form a complete column is by your slogan. And I know that you can't exactly see it because the wording is a little small, but
Right.
if you look on Bernie Sanders, he and him on column C and us on column A actually have the same slogan. So this was further game playing where they split us off from Bernie Sanders to prevent progressives from having the appearance of a legitimate complete line. If we had Bernie Sanders above us on column A, it would have posed a huge threat to this system that they have, because then voters would say, hey, wait, there's two complete lines this time. How is that even possible? The goal is to only have one complete line, and that line is the establishment approved candidates. And that's how this system works.
So what does A1 sponsorship cost? Because basically that's what this looks like to me. So do you buy your position?
Oh no!
You were going to get a sponsorship.
No. The ballot is determined in a random draw. Yeah, exactly. It's randomly drawn every time. It just so happens that the establishment gets the same column every single time. And
this is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous. I cannot believe this is legal.
Who makes this?
I'd also add there is a person called the county clerk who also, and it's pretty interesting because the county clerk can actually, legally, if they so chose, they could choose to put the ballot as the regular ballot that the rest of the country has. But again, the county clerk,
Yes,
Sorry?
but then they could choose to end up in the Hudson River. So,
And they
you know,
can choose to
Well,
not
not
be
only
county
that,
clerk
but the county
anymore.
clerk is a position that you have to run for. And so the
It's an
machine
elected position,
runs their
yeah.
county clerk person.
You're
So
right.
you never
Right.
get one that's like, you know, honest. You always get the machine.
I will say, at least here, the way that we do it is alphabetical order by last name. So for each category. So it's, to me, that's as fair as you could possibly make a, you know, where you literally check a box, you know, and it's pretty decent. This should not be allowed. This is absurd.
One more anecdote to throw on this is that there was once a county clerk who for 30 years always picked the correct ballot for the establishment candidates, constantly giving them the premier ballot on column A. Everybody wants column A because it's the one you see first when you look at the ballot. So as progressives, we were very, very happy in 2020 when in the random draw we actually got column A. What we didn't know is that they would split Bernie Sanders off of our column and put him by himself.
That's the controversy right there.
Yeah.
If column A and column C is not a deliberate move on the establishment's part to basically throw people off because they know that they can't win a fair fight.
That's the controversy. Why the fuck are there columns? Like, this is just the most ridiculous looking thing ever. This looks like a course schedule for, like, you know,
it actually looks like
high school
it looks like a report. No, it looks like a report card.
And like Imani said before, there's so much voter confusion. So people would not know that you could vote for Joe Biden and then vote for Larry Ham on column A and then vote for somebody else on column. People don't know that. So we would get a lot of people saying, look, Bernie Sanders is on column C and you're on column A. Can I vote for each of you? And we'd have to explain to a ton of people, yes, you can. But then for each person that you explain this to, there's thousands of voters who don't know that. And in fact, we would call voters and they would say, this is in a Democratic primary. They would say, oh, don't worry, I voted for all the Democrats. And you know that that's coded language for they just voted down the line.
Because this whole thing is Democrats.
Exactly,
this is what's fascinating. This is a
Democrats.
Primary election.
Yeah,
This is crazy.
So if somebody during the primary says I voted for all the Democrats, it means that they didn't vote for you.
And what if it goes in the other direction in another county? So you can't even say that you have to choose. You can't just put out a generic statement saying you have to pick somebody from each column, because it could be in another county you have to pick somebody from each row. So you can't even. That's a train wreck.
And sometimes there will be people who work like poll workers who will say, oh, yeah, you want to vote down this one if you're a Democrat. Like, that actually happened in my election, that there were poll workers, and we actually reported this, but of course to no avail.
I was going to say, that's definitely not allowed. That's
yeah, but they'll say, like, oh yeah, you know, you vote straight down this. One time I actually went in and I wrote in, because they were all machine people running. There was no progressives running in that race. And I actually wrote in a boss line, like in the space where you can write in names. And I went to go, you know, give it to the lady to give it to the scanner. And she was like, you can't do this. And I was like, ma'am, you are talking to the wrong person. I assure you that I can do that. And she was like, no, you're supposed to vote here. And I'm like, ma'am, I can do this. Put it through. And then another poll worker who came over was like, no, she can do that. She can do that. And they hurried up and put it through the scanner. So, like, you know, it's. I mean, sometimes even poll workers can be confused by it, or like purposely, you know, steer people in the wrong direction.
And imagine, Imani is a very informed voter. Imagine how many times that poll worker has done that to somebody else who was not willing to say, no, put my vote through.
Yeah.
Well, that happened in 2016. You know, when Bernie was surging and it looked like he was really, the moment he was tracking for the nomination was when he won the Michigan primary. And then you had all of those very controversial states that followed after the fact, particularly what happened in Illinois, in Chicago, and what happened in Missouri, in St. Louis.
Did you say Missouri?
That's how it's technically pronounced. And so what ended up happening as a result was they ended up getting footage of people like you're talking about in parts of East St. Louis, which of course is very black and very plighted, and they are easily taken under the wing of the Democratic machine and told, this is what you're going to do when people come to the polls. They weren't just telling people what to do. They were handing them paper, telling them how to vote when they went in there. I mean, it was the most blatant.
You mean like how we do how people do slate
No,
cards
well,
here?
no, it was like official St. Louis County Democratic Party telling you vote for Hillary Clinton when you go in there. It was so clear as day what they were doing. And yet we're still at this point 7 years later, 8 years later, where we're still asking ourselves, why are we putting up with this?
They're still doing it though.
Of course they're still doing it.
You know, Cornel West, the spoiler. To which, you know, it's what's interesting is my answer to that now, just for curiosity, you know, that's a spoiler. I'm like, good. First of all, you can't spoil something that's already rotten, but I would argue. But yeah, no, the whole voting manipulation and how they do that. I can't believe that nobody's like brought any sort of lawsuit about that before.
I think it's just a bullshit. Like,
yeah, tell me what this, because there
that's
has, like, that's crazy.
Yeah,
There's
so
a
a couple
lawsuit now.
candidates
Go ahead.
from the 2020 year got together and did sue a federal lawsuit, if I'm not mistaken, based on the 14th Equal Protection Clause to declare the line unconstitutional. Now, unfortunately, lawsuits take years. It's been going since 2020, and there hasn't been too much progress, but there is, in fact, a lawsuit to declare the line unconstitutional.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can see that. I don't understand how it's gotten this far.
Well, nobody suing people costs money. Suing people costs money. And then, you know, I mean, there's just also like the regular nonsense, because there's basically only three ways that you can defeat the ballot line. So there's the court case, which is going on. There's the legislature can technically pass legislation and the governor has to sign it that says, like, you know, we use a regular ballot, but they all benefit from the line. So they're not going to do that. And then there's the third way, which is, you know, really doing a real voter education campaign. Like that would probably cost millions of dollars to be able to educate people on this, why it's corrupt, and, you know, how they can kind of combat it when they see it. And, you know, like Hector said, court cases take a really long time, plus a lot of money, not for nothing. So, you know, it's kind of like your everyday person who encounters the line, it's really pretty difficult. And then you have to have standing and all that jazz, a certain time frame you have. So it's like, it's very tricky in that way. Like I said, the legislature is not going to legislate away their own power.
You guys don't have ballot initiatives there, huh? You guys do not? You do.
Yeah,
we do. But it's expensive. That's the thing, you know, and, you know, progressives are known for being strapped for cash. Ballot initiatives are very, very expensive campaigns to run because you have to, you know, you have to hire the field folks, you have to get the mailers, you have to get the billboards and the commercials, the digital, all of that, like is a pretty penny. It's like typically in the millions of dollars.
Yeah, we're trying right now. I'm desperately trying to get my bodily autonomy back here. So we have been out canvassing, trying to get petitions signed to get it on the ballot for November 24, which even in our best case scenario, we're still going to be living for more than a year with a 6-week abortion ban here in Florida.
You know, we've seen, as we bring the conversation to a close, you know, one of the hardest realities of what's happened over the past several years, particularly Bernie's runs for the presidency, is that when the losses inevitably happen, and they will happen, it's just the way it is. The system is broken. Capital favors those that are willing to protect it. They are deathly afraid of those that are trying to change it. You'll see what's going to happen with UAW in Detroit. For a lot of us, you know, we have to we have to band together as a unit, especially for those who have run for office, because it's very easy to get discouraged, especially if it doesn't seem like anybody's there fighting in the trenches with you. You know, we go out and we canvass, and, you know, we ask people to come out and volunteer with us, but it's hard. You know, when you're a candidate, it's a little easier. When you have money, it's a lot easier. But trying to get people to spare time to fight for a cause that there are no guarantees is going to be won, it's very hard. But the more we coalesce and bring together these conversations every so often, so we know that we've got each other's back, that we are going to fight the good fight, and it's going to eventually evolve over time, I think that that's the key to what we're doing right now. Is that going to dramatically change the fortunes of New Jersey and Florida at this moment? Probably not.
At least they have bodily autonomy for now.
New Jersey's got a lot of things that, you know, they have that you don't want. Trust me.
No, I get that, but like I'm scared for people here because you can't even drive somewhere else reasonably. I don't even know the next closest state where some of these women can go. It's very scary.
Well, you're also kind of trapped down here in the peninsula.
But
Florida,
yeah,
so
but even
a
still,
little
it's
bit different.
Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi. Like you have to go pretty far. I mean, like I do not know the closest state that somebody could even go to.
Probably North Carolina.
I don't
But
know what
even then-
I'm not sure where their rules are now. Actually.
Well, what we've learned is that when you put the votes in the hands of the people, like you said, if you had the finances to do ballot initiatives, surprisingly, the people vote the way of the populist left for the most part.
Well, and you'd
on
be
almost
amazed
every issue.
when you put out a 6-week abortion ban that hell hath no fury like wealthy white women in the suburbs and their money coming out to support that ballot initiative. So
True.
it's like that's really what we have here right now. So you've got like a lot of very enraged women.
So it's unfortunate that money is speech, but that is the system that we live in. And so little by little, I think we can figure out ways in the future in terms of how we go about attacking this. So we hope that you guys will definitely keep us posted in terms of how things are going to materialize over the next almost 10 months. I mean, obviously, it's going to be quite a grind going towards the end of June when the New Jersey primary will take place. But like you said, this could be an opening because I think all eyes are going to be on New Jersey going forward, especially because of the defiance of your senior senator who is not going to step down. I didn't think for a second he was going to, even though I think they've got him somewhat dead to rights on the gold and a number of these things that you can't explain it away, no matter what you do. So now the question is going to be who's going to rise up, and are there going to be opportunities to change the fortunes of the state of New Jersey?
He's just going to bequeath it to his son.
They're going to try, but I'm not sure it's going to work.
I will bequeath you my state. Well, here in Florida, there's this thing among sitting representatives where they actually do feel entitled to determine who their next person is. They need their successor. They do actually feel entitled to that. It's very weird.
Well, people need to be more engaged. And so you guys are definitely engaged, and hopefully more people will see this and they will become engaged. And little by little, we keep building up this, what do you call it?
Engagement.
Okay, fine. We'll call it that. Imani,
coalition.
Hector, last thoughts before you guys go.
Yeah, last thoughts is, I would not count Menendez out just yet. I'd wait a couple of weeks to see if the retaliation comes. But, like I said, silver lining is maybe finally the lid will be blown off all of the corruption in New Jersey, including our corrupt ballot line. And we can finally start to get some real change around it. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, what are you up to, Hector? What's that logo behind you? What are you working on?
So that logo is what is a different version of what we used when I first started the campaign. I was looking for something very minimalistic that sort of captures where in New Jersey I am, which is the northeast corner of New Jersey, Hoboken, Jersey City, the most densely populated parts of the state. And, there's been a lot of talk about the future of New Jersey's political system. While I also will not count out Bob Menendez, I see significant cracks in the machine system, and I will be exploiting those cracks and those fissures to the fullest extent. I know that we don't have a long timeline, but I do believe that there's a brighter future. And my last takeaway from this whole conversation is that Bob Menendez will have a very interesting time explaining how his co-defendant's fingerprints got on cash that he supposedly withdrew from his personal account. So I'm going to want to hear an explanation as to that one. Maybe he just shares wads of cash with his friends and asks them to hold them for a little while. I don't know.
Maybe he invites people over to the basement. They sit around and play with cash and gold bars, and they just touch it all. And
come on, you've done the home poker game in Jersey. I've done it many times.
Poker game with gold bars and $500,000.
But at the end of the day, I want to make sure that we do not just bequeath a Senate seat to either Junior or any other sort of product of this machine system. So there's a lot of work to be done specifically on the ballot line, but just in voter education. We got to get people motivated. We got to get them out, and we got to give them something to vote for. You know, it's very easy to vote against this, but I think the real task before us is giving the people something to be affirmatively inspired by. So that's what I'm working on here in Hudson County. And there's a lot going on because we do have the off-year elections. So I have a lot of hope for the future, and I'm glad that you guys are willing to have this conversation, which I think is very important, not just because I live in New Jersey.
Yeah, no, I think you guys are great, and I think you're both great candidates. Like I whatever you guys would set your minds to, and there's a lot of decent candidates, but you guys are inspired. I appreciate it very much.
Imani Oakley, Hector Oseguera, thank you so much for coming on. Keep fighting the good fight. Jersey pride, and obviously we will be talking again soon.
Bye, guys.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Perfect segue into what Hector just said, which is you cannot vote against something and expect to win.
No, it doesn't work. And you know what, though? Like, I feel like we keep seeing that over and over again. Like, that they keep trying that, and it just gets harder and harder. That's the most ridiculous thing ever.
Yeah,
Did you grow up like when you
I
first started voting? Is that what it looked like?
Yeah, it was something like that. But at the time, you don't realize it because my political awakening of sorts didn't happen until I came down to Florida. I mean, I had always voted, I'd always been involved, but
right. I guess if you don't know any other state, like you wouldn't know any better.
Of course not.
Right.
But
If that's
I look back
all
on
you
it now, and I realize that it really is terrible.
Oh, it's terrible.
And more than anything else, it's just obvious that when you look at that particular ballot line with Bernie here and the progressives, it's like, come on, you know what you're doing.
Oh my God.
This is not.
And this other guy over there, and that's just the primary ballot. So all of those, like, I would actually think that they get a lot of incorrect ballots where people vote for two people in the same category, and I bet you they get an inordinate amount of incorrect ballots that then get thrown out. And that's one of the reasons that you do that. You do that so that you will get ballots thrown out by people that are either new voters or not as educated voters, whatever it is. You do that so that people's ballots will get thrown out. And I'm sure they throw out tons of ballots because I wouldn't necessarily correctly fill that out. And especially if some counties do it horizontal and some do it that's absurd.
So speaking of voting against something versus voting for something.
Let's see. What do we have here?
So we now know for sure what we've been suspecting all along, and of course people are losing their minds over this. There is a new poll that has come out regarding the upcoming presidential election between Donald Trump and President Biden, and it doesn't look good at all for the current sitting president. So unfortunately, we are now going to hear from...
We're going to hear from Snuffleupagus?
We're going to hear from Snuffleupagus.
Why are we listening to Snuffleupagus?
Well, clearly they have something to say regarding...
Clearly I've been looking at canopies.
Yes, I know. Well, that's the problem with doing any type of news online. You're going to have a lot of ads that are going to be coming at you.
I have been looking at canopies. I'm glad that I'm looking for wholesome things at least. Lord knows what would pop up there.
Well, now you're not going to be distracted from that anymore. So I should have just done this from the very beginning. But here is the breakdown of
George Snuffleupagus.
Well, the warning signs that President Biden is probably in a lot of trouble.
I used to love this guy.
Poll, which signals trouble for President Biden. It comes as the rest of the GOP field gets ready for their second debate. We have team coverage, starting with Chief White House Correspondent Mary Bruce. Good morning, Mary.
Good morning, George. Well, officials here are downplaying these latest numbers, but they certainly are cause for concern for Democrats. Look, President Biden is making the economic recovery the cornerstone of his reelection campaign, but our latest ABC News Washington Post poll shows Americans overwhelmingly just aren't feeling it, that despite easing inflation and low unemployment, Americans really aren't buying into his positive Bidenomics message. Just 30% of Americans approve of his handling of the economy. In fact, 44% of people say they are not as well off now as they were when Biden took office. And on another hot button issue, immigration, the numbers show only 23% of Americans approve of the president's handling of that situation. All of this is leading to a dismal approval rating for the president, now 19 points underwater. And when it comes to Biden himself, we know this. His age is a real political problem for him. Right now, 3/4 of Americans, 74%, say that he is too old to effectively serve a second term. And a majority of Democrats say so.
A very solid point that was just brought up, which I don't think could be ignored. His disapproval to approval rating is 19 points. That is historically bad. That's Jimmy Carter bad.
Oh, I'm listening to Jimmy Carter book right now. He does his own audio book.
How was that, by the way?
The Jimmy Carter book or the cupcake?
The cupcake.
The cupcake is good.
The
Jimmy Carter book is also good.
But you cannot deny the reality of what these polls are showing right now. And yes, age is a factor, not because he's old, but because he is showing signs of decrepit behavior. And that is, you cannot ignore that. No matter how much you want to try to put him in a controlled environment, it's not.
We got to put up the cover of the New Yorker. Was that the cover of the New Yorker with all?
Oh, with the almost like walking. So we're going to finish this now.
Someone else should actually be the nominee, though the party is deeply divided on who that someone else should be. And take a look at this when it comes to the head-to-head matchup with Donald Trump. Our poll is an outlier, and it does differ significantly from other recent polling. But our poll shows Trump with a 9-point lead over President Biden, while 538's average polling still has Biden up by roughly 2 points. And get this, when we ask people if they think that Donald Trump should be constitutionally disqualified from serving another term, even those who said yes, that Trump shouldn't be allowed to run, 18% of them said that they would still vote for him. So, George, the bottom line here, this is just one poll. We are still a ways out from the election, but these numbers do show some real weaknesses for President Biden, George.
Mary Bruce, thanks.
I mean, if that doesn't say it, I don't know what does.
Oh, my God.
Just says it all.
So they don't want it. They don't think he should be running, but they'll vote for him anyway.
Does that not say just how absolutely
Joe, you're
terrible?
So SOL. That's so funny. I honestly, you can't make this shit up.
And then you get them all lining up in a row because apparently tomorrow the president is going to go to Detroit.
And he's going to walk the picket line.
He's going to walk the picket line. Now, is he going to call for GM, Stellantis, and Ford to come to the negotiating table and do as is necessary?
Is he going to promote the PRO Act? Is he going to, I don't know, unfuck the railroad workers? I don't know, Joe. A lot of people can go stand on the picket line, but at the end of the day, if behind the scenes you're still buddy-buddy with management and you're at the end of the day not doing anything to really enforce any sort of like control over capital whorism, then walking on the picket line is nothing.
This is the same problem that took place when he was running against Bernie in 2020. Only now it's significantly worse because now people see who this man really is in terms of how he governs overall.
Where's the PRO Act, Joe?
And so as a result of that, you're now dealing with a president who is not capable of barnstorming around the country and inspiring people with small dollar donations and really getting after it in a way that is going to get people to want to enthusiastically tell other people, you got to vote for Joe. He's definitely the man. He is now even more under the thumb of Wall Street and Silicon Valley money. They're basically going to tell him, if you want us to do as you want us to do, which is make sure that you are properly funded in order to win. Remember, both Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden outspent Donald Trump at least 2-1, if not closer to 3-1, when they ran against them in 2016 and 2020. What do you think it's going to be like this time? It's going to be even worse.
I will say that I do not think they're going to fall for just your photo op on the picket line if you're wanting the UAW endorsement this time around. I don't think that that's going to be sufficient. And it shows how desperate they are in terms of, just like, the appearances of it, that he's even going out there to do this. But that doesn't do much for me. It doesn't do anything for me unless it's backed up with some sort of action. And I have yet to see that. And by the way, yes, there are certain things that have been decent for labor regarding the National Labor Relations Board. There's a recent case that came through that is actually quite good for for unions and organization, but Joe is not really walking the walk. He's just talking the talk. And just because you're standing on a picket line for a photo op does not make you not still in the, in the pockets of the big three.
Ray Infinity, friend of the show, good to see you. It was about 3.5 to 1. I believe that may be correct in 2020. Look, they're going to do what they're going to do, but the numbers
What
are
was 3.5 to 1?
That Biden's campaign outspent Trump's campaign.
Oh.
And so these numbers...
And he barely won.
And now you're looking at, and again, one would say, well, polls are certainly an outlier, but Trump is kicking rear end in swing states. That's also the kicker. So there is this disconnect amongst a lot of voters who simply think that because it's Trump again, it's like they want to pretend that Biden's last 3 years don't exist.
Well, no, the disconnect predominantly is from Democrats. They're extremely disconnected electorally from reality.
But you know who's not disconnected from reality? Independent voters.
Yeah.
Because the independent voters are swinging significantly in Trump's favor. And when that starts to happen, I'm not going to say it's over, but it's trending in that direction. Because this is a poll that they're going to say is an outlier. And I guarantee you, there's going to be a polling company that's going to come out with a poll within a week that's going to show Biden ahead by a few points. He'll
get a bump from public appearance.
100%.
I mean, he'll get a bump, but it's not gonna last because there's nothing with that.
We've said many times before that the one significant difference when it comes to Trump and the way that he's been portrayed in society and the way that polite society will have no part of a conversation regarding him and how he has maintained his popularity, if not in some ways exceeded where he's ever been before. There is a silent Trump vote in this country. There is not a silent Biden vote. There is not this plethora of closeted Biden voters who don't want to be shamed by society if they come out and say, well, I'm actually voting for Joe. But there is that voter for Trump.
Yeah, there is. I agree, Nelson. You know what? At this point, everything is just a little too little, a little too late as far as I'm concerned for labor. Because when you're talking about the railroad workers and when they deal with and how they got shut down and the safety issues, and then you look at what's going on in East Palestine and all these places that are basically the collateral damage of our failed infrastructure. And then you say, oh, but Joe shows up at a picket line for the United Auto Workers. Yay, I guess. Like, what is that really doing?
You know, the funny thing about the tweet that we put out today, and Colin, if you have it, we talked about the realities of why Biden is down 9 or even 10 points in this latest poll. It's reflective of the trends that are happening regarding what is clearly energy that is brewing on the side of the GOP and zero energy, is less than zero on the Democratic side. Nothing was done about healthcare. Nothing is done about a living wage. Labor is not getting the attention that it deserves. We are also been in a highly controversial situation regarding our foreign policy. We have endless war. You can debate all you want about what's going on in Ukraine, as far as I'm concerned. This is just another proxy for the military-industrial complex. This could have been over within weeks. Instead, it's now going to be years, more than likely. At least that's the intention. But if Trump gets in, I believe that if he actually keeps a campaign promise and says that I will broker peace between Ukraine and Russia the second I get in there, if you think that's not helping him in the polls, I don't know what you're looking at or who you're paying attention to, but you're really stuck in an echo chamber. You need to get out of it because that is a winning issue, whether you like it or not. And if that's not enough, the planet's on fire. So what's the solution to tens of thousands of people marching in the streets of New York City saying that we have to get off of fossil fuels in whatever capacity must be done? Let's create 20,000 Climate Corps jobs. Not to say that that's not good, but to suggest that that is what is actually going to solve the crisis right now. No way, no how, that's not going to solve the problem. And so the numbers are reflective of how, even though it would almost seem ludicrous to the idea that Trump could get back in the White House again, it's not, because as I've often said, as much as people hate Donald Trump, they hate our broken economic and political system that much more. And that is why the numbers are bearing out the way that they are. Any thoughts?
No, I'm sitting here trying to deal with the Lulu situation.
and you can deal with the legal situation.
She wants. Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Do you want to?
My thoughts are that there is a snowball's chance in hell of Joe Biden winning again. That's my opinion. That's been my opinion. I keep telling you every time that you want to talk about anything having to do with this, that this whole thing is just ridiculous. I don't understand it. It's just stupid. There's a million things he could do to win, and he chooses to not do any of them. So he's not going to win. It's that simple.
Well, this was the tweet that we put up. No matter how you spin it, the economy is not doing well for working people. We have no health care, no living wage, endless war, runaway inflation, and a planet that's on fire. That's why it's Trump over Biden 51-42. What is equally amazing are the people that come on and comment on this, some thinking that we're Trump supporters or thinking that, oh, you're going to now support Trump. You think he's going to do any better? How about the whole system is broken and we need to figure out a way to either start over or really clean house? There is no solution to voting against Donald Trump. That won't work. Donald Trump lost the 2020 election, not Biden won it. He lost the election because he couldn't handle a crisis the proper way. Now, of course, there was little that we knew about it at the time. Now that that has been dealt with, and now we know the realities of COVID, it's not going to be the same again.
No.
It's just not.
No.
So that's where.
And there is, again, if it says that, I would give an additional handful of points to Trump. Because again, it's sort of at least what I would give to a home field advantage. You have to add on top of Trump because of that silent Trump vote, and it is there. It's very real. There are a lot of people that are embarrassed to say yes.
So what I would also, I would also technically say that you have to remember here, and I've been saying it for the past few years, which is Biden needed to be populist left to a fault to drag this country in the right direction and away from somebody like Donald Trump. And not only did he not do that, he was worse as a standard bearer politician in many ways than even Donald Trump was. You're talking about issuing more drilling permits in 2 years than Trump did in 4 years. I mean, how absolutely out of sight, out of mind do you have to
with
be?
Ukraine. There's a lot of problems.
He
Horrible with labor.
Anything. And then these excuses like the parliamentarian or pushing forward anybody who thinks for 1 second that the infrastructure bill was good. Again, 3%, 5%, 7%, probably good. The rest is fluff, corruption, years and years of delays, and expense.
It's nothingness.
It's nothing.
It's nothing. Nobody's lives have been made materially better.
You had the opportunity to first pass the Build Back Better bill, which had some good things in there.
But Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema.
But it's their fault. You had the income tax credit, the universal pre-K.
$15 minimum wage, but that was the parliamentarians' fault.
And that's why it didn't get passed. No, because you choose to do the bidding of the very donors that run this country and the world. This is why the numbers are where they are. Donald Trump takes not as much money from billionaires as Joe Biden does, but he takes enough. So despite his,
he is the everyman.
The everyman.
He's not the everyman.
That he's out there actually doing something on behalf of working people. He is not. But you know what? He is technically an outsider if you compare him to somebody like Joe Biden. And that's not going to help you.
Well, Trump didn't write the crime bill.
No.
I mean, look, it's one of those where it's like.
And the hardest thing for the Democratic voter, even the Democratic voters that are down here in this area that listen and are aware of this show and know what we say, we are not saying this because we're trying to help Donald Trump. We're saying this because we're trying to help the goddamn country.
And can you seriously, I honestly could go back to the 80s as long as I can remember finding him to be repugnant and disgusting. I've never liked that man, ever. And it's just, to me, it's laughable. But I feel like we offered the compromise.
We did.
It was Bernie
Sanders was the compromise.
That was the compromise.
Yeah.
And they were like, no, we're going to double down with our neoliberal.
No, you're all going to. Well, no, the problem, as I've always said with comfortable liberals in the suburbs, is that their security and their comfort is more important than economics, health, anything.
Well, it's a fear factor for them. They're very easily controlled by fear.
Correct. And so as a result, you're now really going to find out how bad it's going to get because the whole thing is going to go helter-skelter all over the place.
No, I am not for Trump.
There's not enough people that can put the cat back in the bag now. It's not going to happen. We're really entering that trajectory now where anything that can happen will happen. That's where we're going.
Yeah.
And this is a poll that is reflective of that. And they're still not doing anything about it. And the person that they want to have replace Joe Biden just did an interview the other day praising Ronald Reagan. Couldn't say enough good things about Ronald Reagan. And Newsom, Newsom is actually going to go forward with this debate in November with Ron DeSantis. If that is not a sign that they're trying to set this up to get Newsom ready to go, the second that Joe cannot continue. Again, the controversy, of course, here is that Kamala's not having any of it. She's not stepping aside. She will sink the country for her own personal
well, that's why they would have to do it how they would have to do it. And I actually think that that was the valid part of Kim's sort of hypothesis. I think that the Kamala Harris factor is one of the biggest, I think, reasons that we have this sort of primary situation that we have where we have Joe running again. I think they had hoped that she would be capable, that she would do better, have better numbers, be more likable. I don't know. I think they had a lot higher hopes, and they realized that she has worse numbers than he does, if that's at all possible. And so that was why I think she is fundamentally the source of their strategy as to why they're running Joe again.
Can't argue with that. And if you guys want to see right now exactly what the uprising looks like on the international scale, guess what happened yesterday?
What happened yesterday?
France is officially pulling out of a military occupation in Niger.
You mean they were asked to leave and they're leaving now? They're leaving. But are we leaving?
Not sure about that one.
Because we were asked to leave and Joe was like, nah, think we'll stick around.
Well, I think it would only be fair for the audience to see exactly what we're talking about. So here's what's happening right now in Niger.
Niger.
Niger? Oh, it's Niger?
It's Niger.
Niger. Excuse me. Niger, with the French pronunciation.
That's how.
Here is your French pronunciation, and here is exactly what Macron is going to say.
No. That's how the people in Niger say it.
Okie dokie. Here we go.
La France a décidé de ramener son ambassadeur. Et donc, dans les prochaines heures, notre ambassadeur, avec plusieurs diplomates, rentreront en France. Et nous mettons fin à notre coopération militaire avec les autorités de fait du Niger, car elles ne veulent plus lutter contre le terrorisme.
C'est donc la fin de la présence française militaire au Niger.
Elle sera organisée dans le temps, dans les semaines à venir, mais c'est la fin de cette coopération. Parce que nous ne sommes pas là pour participer à la vie politique, pour être les otages en quelque sorte de putschistes. Mais je vais être très clair. On le voit déjà aujourd'hui au Mali. Quand ils vont rentrer de manière ordonnée dans les semaines et les mois qui viennent. Et là, nous concerterons avec les putschistes parce que nous voulons que ça se fasse dans le calme.
Mais d'ici la fin de l'année.
Mais d'ici la fin de l'année.
So they were asked to leave and they're leaving. I think that's, that's progress. That's some sort of like a good amount of, sort of self-national awareness. But yeah, I think that when a sovereign nation asks you to get out, you get out.
Now, why would they want to be in Niger in the first place?
I'm going to go with uranium for double jeopardy.
So apparently uranium plays a significant role in light bulb production, among other things, in the country of France. But we all know that uranium is used for weaponry.
And you know what? And I'm all for French government having fair and nice trade with the people in Niger, and you can very nicely give them what they need, and you could get what they have, and that would be equitable. Then please do so. But the fact that you can't be there and domineer and exploit it and take the resources, I'm sure that's very hard to deal with. We don't have that here. We don't ever deal with that here. In this country, we just take. We were asked to leave Niger, and we're not leaving.
Well, that's because we have a military might that never seems to ever meet its match.
The caucasity.
And so
that's what it is.
Yeah,
it's just unbelievable. Sovereign nation asks us to leave, and we're just going to stay. And honestly, and I am not a proponent of violence, but when something violent happens and some group of people from either the military sect of Niger, I don't really understand all their geopolitics, but when someone from one of those groups does some sort of horrible, violent terrorist thing against either Americans or whatever it is, it's like then people are going to be so surprised that happens, and it'll have to be like how we now have to go deal with them, because as if we need to deal with that. And it's just bizarre to me that we're just sitting in a sovereign nation that asked us to leave.
Yeah. That's a big problem.
It's a big problem. So yeah, and I honestly, if I were an American person in Niger that I was working for either the military or whatever, I would be very distressed that we were asked to leave and we're forcibly occupying a sovereign nation.
Metropolis says China and or Russia is going to fill the gap. You know what? It is what it is.
And
man.
here's the difference, though. And you want to know the big difference? The way China does things is very different than the way we do things. China is not an imperialist nation. China is economically astute, but the way they do things is different than how we do things. There's a reason that if you go and just ask the everyday person in somewhere in Africa or somewhere in South America, which country do you think is the biggest threat to your world peace? They don't say China. They say the United States.
Oh, it's universal.
So China is, I understand, but the thing is, we were asked to leave. Now, what other countries do, that's on them. I don't agree with occupying a sovereign nation. So now we are illegally occupying Niger, just like we are in Syria. And there's a handful of other places that I think fit into that category. So just add Niger to another list of countries that we're just illegally occupying.
Somebody really, Americans, there's a lot of American exceptionalism that's still out there, and they are not willing to realize that there are other nations in the world, whether it is China or Russia, that other nations with rich natural resources would rather do business with them than do business with us.
Go figure.
And you know what? It's not complicated.
No, and this BRICS situation, and for people who aren't following that, and I have to learn a lot more about it, but it seems to me that that's basically the rest of the world just being done with the schoolyard bully and saying enough of us. It's like American hegemony is just, people are sick of it. The world is sick of it. And so, yeah, it makes sense to me that they're going to seek an alternative. And no, maybe it is jumping from a frying pan into a fire. I don't know. But I know that it isn't working well for them having us there and occupying and taking their resources and keeping everybody on our currency and just controlling the world. I'm not a fan of it.
Yeah, and there's no question. And even, again, the response is China has a great record. Who gives a damn? Who cares? Our record sucks. You can't throw stones at other places when you can't, when you have a glass house to begin with.
Well, it's like, and the thing is, Metal, I am not a Chinese citizen. I don't live in China. So I have no standing with that, right? Like I can't control that. I can tell you that our government has let China have significant ownership of our country, even though we're not allowed to own a single thing in their country. So if we have to take issue with anybody, it needs to be our government for how they have not protected us and not protected our economy from governments like China. But in terms of how they treat people in other, continents and what we would call the global South, there's no comparison.
No.
And there are problems because they definitely do build infrastructure that has not been, there's been issues with it not being done well. I'm not saying that they're without issue, but the people in those countries do not fear the Chinese like they fear the United States. They do not fear them. And there's a reason for that. They don't dominate and control them in the way that we tend to do. It is different. And again, I have no control over what they do. I really don't have any control over what we do or we wouldn't be doing it. But I don't have standing to complain about their government. I have standing to complain about mine. That's all it really comes down to. You keep your own house clean. I can't worry about what China is doing or whatever. I can see what we're doing. Stop with the what about shit. Focus on your own house. Mind your business.
Give you a good example, my friend. You support Donald Trump. You can look at it from the perspective of people are voting against Donald Trump. That's not going to work. Well, you know what? Complaining about what's China going to do if they decide to occupy Niger, we should not be occupying them, period. This isn't about, oh, well, it's okay if we do it. It's just not okay if they do. it's not okay, period.
But the Chinese have historically, notoriously, they are not that type. They are not an empire in that way. They don't imperialize the way we do. They definitely have an economic system going on that they are definitely enriching themselves.
Yeah, you know what the problem with China is compared to us? China's a lot smarter than we are.
There's that. You know what's interesting? We should all be lucky that they're not occupying us. If China was really imperialistic and they would like kind of call their chips due with the amount of ownership that they have, actual land ownership of our country, if they were to actually really do something with that and really want to like call their debts due, we'd be in trouble. Like China is economically a huge force. And yet that's not what they're seeking to do. So you know what? Let's stop worrying about what they do and start controlling what we do.
Yeah. We have definitely stretched ourselves way too thin.
Stay out of people's business, man. Stay out of their business. You know, it's like if you're so scared that they're not going to trade with you because you're the bullies of the world, and so you're going to end up with not having the access to the uranium, good.
Think of it this way, and you could bring it back also to the war in Ukraine. You know, right now you're looking at, on paper, 500,000 Ukrainians that have been killed in this war since the beginning.
Which means you have to add, like, I don't even remember what the percentage is when you don't know a number, but it's more.
So when you think about the State Department and what they know and what they knew going into this conflict and what they knew the demands of Putin and the Russians were at the time, and basically sitting around and saying to themselves, we can accept this many people being killed, that's how it works. They have decided that if another 500,000 Ukrainians have to die, then so be it.
Oh, this is going to go on for years.
This is how when this war goes.
This is how
until there is a literal uprising within the United States. That's it. Again, the only thing that I can honestly see right now that could potentially end the war is if Trump gets in and says, I'm going to declare we're going to broker peace, which is why I think they're so hell-bent on stopping him, because this is a $200 billion enterprise that is growing every day.
I don't know that he would necessarily stop it because, you know, when he first ran, he got in with this whole, we're going to stop the war in Syria. We're going to stop the war in Syria. And then as soon as he sat down, you know, like the deep state tapped him on the shoulder and said, yeah, actually, sir, we're not going to get out of Syria. And then he came back on and said, we're actually not going to get out of Syria. So I don't know that he would necessarily just say, oh, I'm going to get us out of there, because I don't know that it's really within the control of the person in the Oval Office anymore.
Yeah.
That's what it's, unless they're willing to get dead.
Well, I don't know.
I mean, that's what happens, because in order to do that, then basically what you're doing is you're contradicting the deep state. You're contradicting the war machine. And the only president really who did that was Kennedy. And it didn't work out well. And then, you know, what I've since learned is other people that have challenged the war machine were Nixon and Carter, who both ended up getting theirs from the deep state as well.
Correct.
So point being, Trump might go in there with all the best intentions of wanting to end it, but that doesn't mean he actually will.
Well, that's going to be something that I think will weigh heavy on a lot of voters. And last thing on this particular subject, you know, if you're out there and you're really concerned about the environment, and that is a top issue for you, as it is for a lot of people, especially in the 18 to 29 demographic and even younger, especially, you know, a lot of young Zoomers, if you will. If that is your top issue, and you are not pointing the finger at the military-industrial complex and the outsized role that they play in the decimation of the planet and the acceleration of runaway climate change, then shut up.
Well, it's them and it's big ag.
Yeah.
Those are the two. Yeah, I mean, for sure, those are the two biggest contributors to our climate crisis. That man-made part of the climate crisis. Like, those are the two biggest contributors.
You cannot ignore.
It's not the cars. It's not the cars.
And how do you? And Donald definitely agree. Private jets definitely play a role. There's
Absolutely.
no question that they do.
So think about how much private jet fuel would be involved in the military-industrial complex. So that's a big part of it. So yeah, private jets is definitely one of those things where it's an exponential damage based on the benefit. So if those people would still be able to fly from point A to point B, but they'd have to take commercial, then yeah, it's exponentially horrible for the environment to fly private. Again, it's I can't.
And let's not, you know, let's not ignore the reality of, you know, if you think of like an F-14 and when you're going 700-800 miles an hour, do you know what kind of gas you're burning through at that point?
Yeah, I mean those things are, yeah. So it's really the military-industrial complex and big agri. And when I say big agri, it is predominantly beef.
Sure.
It's predominantly big beef. That's where and from which the giant, massive amounts of our country's contribution to the climate crisis.
We've become an instant oatmeal society where we think everything is readily available at our fingertips at all times. And that is the greatest sin of the likes of the Jeff Bezoses of the world, making you think that you don't have to think about what it takes to create anything or to make things move. It's like, I want this now, I want it tomorrow, and I'm going to get it one way or the other. That level of greed and selfishness is a mark of all people in society. Conservatives have their own streak of selfishness when it comes to individualism versus collectivism. But liberals have their own version of selfishness because of their desire to have everybody else do everything for them. And rather than learn a skill or learn a trade, being able to figure out how to do it on their own. We're all guilty. We all do things to set ourselves on this course straight to hell.
I will say, but my goal, and I do aspire to this in so many ways, and I am setting it up to be able to do this at some point. My goal is to sort of retire and be net neutral with the earth. Like, that is my goal. My goal is to retire, have my nice little cob house somewhere where I don't need AC and I can live off the grid and I can be as net neutral as possible. That's just my personal goal. And I know that that's lofty.
Ray, welcome to the channel. We are not supporters of Governor DeSantis. That doesn't mean that we spend our time bashing him religiously.
No, we call, like, when he's done things that I've agreed with, I've said he's done things I agreed with. And when he's done things I completely disagree with, he's done so. The 6-week abortion ban was a bridge too far, and I think is what sort of tanked him nationally.
It's amazing, but he was actually a good governor on the environment prior to his aspirations for wanting to be president.
Yeah.
And
I will also say, and this is something I've always been consistent with across the board, I don't like it when people just win one seat and they're already not doing that job to run for the next job. I think that when you are elected to a position, serve in that position and do what you're supposed to do before seeking your next goal. And I've said that with all different candidates in different places.
Don, don't assume that we can't find common ground.
You're wrong, Don. We're very.
Look at what Ray says. Liberals never talk about the military being a problem with the climate crisis, just about climate.
No, we talk about the military, and we also very often have talked about the regenerative ag and lack thereof.
Correct. And that is a huge part of the problem. Huge.
Well, you know what it is that's very frustrating? It's not that regenerative ag is like the be all end all, but it's one of those things that we actually can do. And it can be done without causing any further damage to any other ecosystem or indigenous group of people. Like, it is actually something that we can do, and it would be effective. That's why I think it's so important to push that. Between reforestation and regenerative ag, that's the way to go. We're not going to, all of the new technology, whether it's solar or wind or all of that stuff. And guys, we've done a show on this with the authors of Bright Green Lies. If you haven't read Bright Green Lies, I highly recommend it. But the reality is that we are not able to sustain our life on this planet the way that we are as society. We're just not. It's going to come to an end at some point, not necessarily in our lifetime, but it will. And all of the different changes in the world are not going to make there be more, right? So we have to, at some point, go into more of like a degrowth, turning into small, more sustainable, regenerative communities. And that's what's going to need to happen.
Living off the land.
Yeah. And so those are the kinds of solutions. And of course, I'm now stuck on the municipal rainwater collection is definitely something. But yeah, there's things that we can be doing to mitigate damages. Absolutely. But in the long term, we can't keep living how we're living.
We can't.
It's untenable. It's untenable unless you're totally okay with hurting people. And that's really what it comes down to, because in order for us to sustain this, when I think about like the kids with their hands at cobalt mines and lithium mines and all this stuff, it's like, we can sustain to a certain point, but it's not okay.
No.
It's just not okay. And the only reason we do it is because most people don't know. You're not aware. Nobody sees it. If everybody who was buying a Tesla and thinks that they're saving the world actually saw the kids that were mining the shit to make their batteries, they might not feel so okay with it. It's this like,
no, we need high-speed rail. We've needed high-speed rail.
We need a lot of things. We need a lot of
That's one
things.
example of transportation. Yeah. It's like right now here in Florida, they're celebrating after a decade.
Oh my God!
Of finally getting Bright Line from Miami to Orlando. You needed a decade to get the Bright Line from Miami to Tallahassee. And the idea that it hasn't been completed.
Literally, they are celebrating here that we now have rail from Miami
to
Orlando.
You don't need to have a mass transit system to get people from Miami to Orlando. They know how to get there already. It's if you haven't been to our state capital, there is almost no way of getting there. You have to go through so many hoops to get to our state capital.
Right. Because it's not ideal.
If you had a high-speed rail system and you could literally get to Tallahassee from Orlando in less than 3 hours, that would make a world of difference in terms of how engaged people are politically in the state.
That's just this state
up there. Just
rail in general. But regardless,
it's a topic for another day.
It is.
And one thing I will say before we go that Ray Infinity brought up. His abortion stance has. Let me tell you something.
It did actually.
I actually think that one of the key ingredients to Trump's surging poll numbers right now is because of his stance on abortion. He is pro-choice. Period.
He won't come out and say it. He skirts the issue, but the reality is not only did his abortion stance have effect on, it might not have had necessarily on his national polling now, but why he started tanking. And certainly in Florida, a bunch of people jumped ship. A lot of our congressional delegation, the Republicans, as soon as DeSantis did that, endorsed Trump. That's not a coincidence.
Correct.
It was a bridge too far. And do not underestimate the anger of the women. I got to tell you.
And Trump's political instincts are usually pretty.
The women are angry.
Yeah. So it's going to be a very but as we said, it sucks for our state. But for the rest of the country, you have officially dodged the DeSantis bullet.
I honestly, I am so scared for girls, for young women, for all women, really. Yeah. But like, I'm thankful that I am no longer in that category of women. But it's very, very upsetting to me what's going to happen. Our maternal and infant mortality rates are going to go through the roof.
Yeah, they are. But there's a lot of other terrible things that will inevitably come about. So for Thursday, we don't have a guest lined up yet. I almost had, I thought what was lined up, but we'll work on that.
What did you think was lined up?
We're working on getting a friend back on the show. We'll surprise everybody in the future. But next Monday, we are going to have on Andrew Yang. And
we'll be in the afternoon on Monday because and we're going to be talking with Andrew about his new book.
And we may have Steve Grumbine on as well, so we'll see about that.
Don't tease me with a good time.
So hope you guys like what we're doing. Remember, we are a demonetized show right now. So for those of you who are considering becoming a supporter, make sure that you go to patreon.com/generational change for as little as $5 a month. Become a supporter of our small but mighty channel.
Here's what happens. You know what? Everybody gets a Lulu sticker if you want one, except for people. And guys, if you do join on Patreon, like the last few people have specifically not wanted stuff. They're nice. They're like, save the stuff.
They just appreciate it.
Which is sweet and it's nice. But yeah, for sure, if you do want to get some merch, you make sure to put your address in there.
Yes. And for our channel, remember the money that comes in is not money that is going to us as a handout of any kind. It is actually going to our producers to help facilitate this channel and make it better. Remember, our goal here is to transform politics into service. That is our goal. We've been working on that for quite some time. And each and every one of you that helps us out, it really does
helpful.
go a long way.
Yeah, it's really helpful.
And so we are grateful for any and all support that comes about. And of course, if you are more inclined to just want to go to Cash App because you don't want to put your credit card on the grid, let's face it, most people really don't want to, and I don't blame you. You can swing over to Cash App, $GenChange, and any amount there that you can contribute, obviously.
It's very helpful.
Yeah. So For everyone that's been here tonight, Imani Oakley, as always, multi-mind, been seeing you a lot lately. Great to see you. DeFreak, consistent. That's great. Rainfinity, great conversation. Donald James.
Oh, how did we get demonetized? I have a theory, but when we called to find out, the official answer from Google was they didn't know, and that we had to wait until something in November, I guess that's when we can appeal it or whatever it is. I don't know. But they didn't give us a specific thing. There wasn't like some specific content or anything like that. And that's why I think it had to be personal, because we didn't do anything different than we would normally have done it. We've definitely covered, more non-centrist issues many times in the past. So I don't know. I think it was personal. That's why.
Yeah, it'd be easy to surmise that as well. And of course, thank you all for obviously, thank you, Rob. Obviously a great show all around, very important information. The ballot line is
no warnings, no notice, no nothing. All of a sudden we were just demonetized, and our producer called and asked why. And the answer was, yeah, it doesn't say here, but you got to wait until November to do whatever it is that we got to do. So literally there was no explanation, no nothing. It was just one day we were just demonetized.
Maybe we need to live stream on Rumble.
We can. I mean,
I don't know how well received it would be there.
I don't know. We have a Rumble account, but I've never really gone over there too much.
No, I don't. It doesn't. I mean, look, it is what it is.
It happens, by the way. That happens all the time.
Yeah.
It happens all the time. I actually was recently thinking that Russell Brand was getting really big. And I remember catching myself thinking like, that's interesting. He's getting really big. And apparently he got a little too big for them.
And that's not to deny that he could very well have done the things that they say that he has done.
Completely unrelated.
But, it's like Senator Menendez. It's like, are you going to get your day in court? Well, he'll get his day in court. But evidently somebody like Russell Brand is not getting his. So that's, Ray, we really appreciate it. And if anybody is hoping to help us out and
we take all sorts of happy and kind donations. We're just a small little nonprofit plugging along here, trying to educate people.
Please email generationalchange@gmail.com.
Yeah, if you have something that you think you can help us with, we are very open to suggestions and help.
Yeah, it would obviously be tremendously appreciated.
If you know anybody in Gen Z that would like to help me get a Gen Z report revived.
Hey, you know what? The fact of the matter is we've got several conservatives in the chat tonight, and we're not on the show trying to cater to conservatives. Isn't that amazing how that works? Isn't that incredible? You don't actually have to kiss conservatives' ass. You just have to respect them as people.
I think what it is about me is that people know me. Like I just equally dislike all people. I'm an equal opportunity disliker, and so I don't have to. You know what it is? It's that I see that it's all a circus, and people are all like it's all individuals. Some people, some candidates, some senators, some representatives. They all do good things, and they do some bad things, and they do things I like and things I don't like.
DeFreak, I do not know what you're talking about regarding Congressman Schiff. Hopefully,
we're not fans, if that's what you think.
Not in a million years.
That's not our
Katie
guy.
Porter or Barbara Lee. That is who should be the next. And here's
but is there something else that happened with that?
Well, evidently something did happen. I noticed his name was getting thrown around.
Okay, we're not aware. We don't know what happened.
So whatever it is, obviously we'll probably address it on Thursday. What I was going to say is related to Katie Porter or Barbara Lee. It is painfully clear, based on fundraising numbers alone, and based on the establishment's choice, led by Nancy Pelosi, that one of the final two candidates in November of 2024 for the U.S. Senate in California will be Adam Schiff. Now, the question becomes, who is the other Democrat going to be? Is it going to be Barbara Lee or is it going to be Katie Porter? The only thing I can hope for is that whoever it is and whoever doesn't win and ultimately is not part of the top two, that candidate endorses whoever that other person will be.
You can hope.
If Katie Porter's the one on the ticket, then Barbara Lee, God willing, will endorse her. And if it is Barbara Lee who is the nominee, we certainly hope Katie Porter would do the same. So that's at least that's my philosophy on that.
Yeah. DeFreak, we are very reasonable. I pride myself on reason. I think it's very important, actually. If you think, like my three things are reason, passion, and justice. I try to be reasonable about pretty much most things.
I am
really
not, I do not hide the fact that I have a level of disdain for Representative Schiff that rivals that of my own Congresswoman. I think he is one of the best examples of what's wrong with the United States Congress today. And one of the things about his corruption that never gets talked about is that one of the big controversies, particularly in Southern California, is, I don't want to misquote the name of the aqueduct, but the water system that provides drinking water to the city of Los Angeles. This was the main issue in the film Chinatown, which was made exactly 50 years ago. So this has not changed over the course of that time. So if you're not too familiar with Adam Schiff and the big conglomerates that he's in political bed with, that's something that would serve all of you well in knowing about Adam Schiff's involvement with the water issues in the state of California. So anything that you're going to tell me regarding his bribery involvement,
I would just think it was common sense. Yeah, Rob, it is kind of interesting how the conservatives give progressives a chance, but not the liberals. You know what's interesting is sort of like that's our sort of common enemy. We all hate the liberals. Like, that's the problem.
Jackson, Mississippi.
Oh, we do. We've mentioned it many times.
East Palestine, Ohio.
Flint, Michigan.
Flint, Michigan.
But, I mean, but here's the thing. If you're going to say Jackson, Mississippi, or Flint, Michigan, and I've said this 1,000 times.
They're all over the place.
It's everywhere. Those are the ones we know. For every rat you see, there's 50 that you don't. And this is a serious problem.
Correct.
So if you're going to tell me, okay, Joe, again, we can go back to Joe Biden standing on the UAW picket line. How far is he from Flint, Michigan? And they still don't have clean water. And so it's like, okay, so you're going to stand on the picket line for a photo op. And yet this governor and that president, and they're all just, oh, we're just so with the common man, but yet they don't have clean water in Flint. That's the crazy. That's the crazy. And therein is why I will not vote for Joe Biden. Because you know what? Because they don't have clean water in Flint. That's why.
There are very simple solutions to a lot of these problems. And people want to ignore those realities. Because for a lot of people, they're scared. Liberals are scared in their own way, and conservatives are scared in their way.
And their leadership pushes them,
takes advantage,
and gets them to punch down. So for the liberals, they punch down to, the Republicans, the deplorables, and then the Republicans punch down to, like the immigrants or the transgender or whatever, right? Like that's just what they do. Everybody's leadership gets them to punch down. My goal is to direct people in the correct direction. Sort of like, when you're coming in with an airplane, I want to be like, if people are angry, direct your anger above you. It is never the person with less structural power than you that is the cause of your woes, ever. It is not going to be the poor people coming across the border. It is not, those are not the people that are the cause of the problem. And the Democrats just have different scapegoats. They blame the Republicans.
I'm going to remind you, and we're going to leave on this note, guys, but I will remind all of you that if you really want to know what politics looks like in the United States.
These two.
This is it.
Oh, yeah.
This image is the United States Congress. They all act like they're enemies.
No, it's World Wrestling.
But in reality, they all go and have a drink and a nice laugh at the end of the day after they've convinced the Americans that that side's your enemy and this is blah, 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 blah. That's what they do. I always thought that this image was so telling when it came out. It really speaks.
The whole thing is gross.
The haves versus the have-nots.
We have a lot of different kind of, whether it's video clips or photos that to me sort of symbolically show how much of this sort of aristocracy we really have in this country, and how we really are serfs, and these people are just sort of like laughing all the way to the bank.
That's always been the case.
Yeah.
There's nothing redeemable about these particular individuals because they have gamed the system in a way to enrich themselves and screw us in the process. That's how this works. You know why no one talks about single-payer healthcare in the United States? Because it takes out the corporate special interests out. It takes them out of the equation. It allows for believe it or not, a real free market health system where the best doctors get the most amount of patients. That's really how it's supposed to work. Not your HMO or your PPO or your Medicare Part D or any of these other crooked for-profit in systemic constructs that allow these for-profit middlemen to screw us in the process. And that's just one system. Health is obviously the most obvious.
Yeah, Ray, actually, we don't do a whole lot of name calling on this show. We do, yeah, there's a certain amount of political nonsense and banter, but for the most part, if you go back, we have 3 years of content of long form interviews with all sorts of different kinds of experts. And we're really more issue focused. We do issues, different series based on things that we think are important issues. So we don't do that here. I mean, yeah, we do some silly stuff from time to time, but for the most part, we're really trying to educate people on important topics and things that we think will help further the mission of trying to fix some of the mess that we're in.
Transforming politics into service. That is our mission. So smash the like button, subscribe, share, do all those wonderful things that we ask you to do all the time. You guys are great. Great to see you, Ray. Great to see you, Donald. Great to see you, DeFreak, Metalopoly. All of you guys, Multimind, you've all been great. Very lively chat, small but mighty.
We will be back Thursday with something fun. You never know what you might come up with.
We'll figure it out. We'll see you then.
Bye, y'all.